Hi, I'm Matt Marshall, founder and CEO of VentureBeat. I am here with Parag Agrawal, CTO of Twitter, who's setting Twitter's vision. And we're talking today about how Twitter uses AI and ML at scale to empower the public conversation, but also to flag harmful speech. So, Parag, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Parag, many viewers here and other speakers at the summit on conversational AI today are obviously talking about how you build a, a bot or a conversational agent to apply in this or that setting or field. But in many ways, Twitter is doing the reverse, right? You're actually battling adversaries that are building these bots. Can you talk a little bit about how you see Twitter's activity with AI and conversational AI?
It's a great question, Matt. If you think about most people working on conversational AI, people are building agents to interact with humans conversationally, right? To do that, there are advancements like better understanding of language, better capturing context around a conversation, as well as building a better knowledge base so you can interact with a human. Now, Twitter does not build a bot that interacts with humans in some way, but our platform is all about conversations. In fact, our mission as a company is to serve the public conversation, and we spend a lot of time doing work on improving that conversation. And all of the advancements I mentioned earlier help us improve that conversation. You rightly mentioned that we also have to think about the flip side of these advancements, right? We have to worry about our adversaries who are trying to manipulate the public conversations and how they might use these new techniques and how they might use them to manipulate the conversation. And that's actually a fascinating space that we're diving into. I would be remiss if I did not mention sort of the positive side of conversational AI. We host good conversational AI bots on the platform. In fact, one of my favorite follows is this account called at Real Human VC, which surprisingly went
Yeah.
silent a few weeks ago, which is built on GPT-2 and is really fun to follow. So for those watching, I'd recommend that.
Parag, thanks for that. We see a lot of advancements in conversational AI. So over the last year, I think we're seeing what we saw on the computer vision side a couple of years ago, right? There's these breakthroughs with BERT and other models and algorithms. Can you talk a little, is this an arms race where, so the adversaries get more advanced and then you have to advance as well? Can you talk a little bit about the advancements, what you're seeing maybe on the positive side, negative side?
Oh, great question. In some sense, some of the adversarial cases are an arms race. But it's useful to sort of take a step back on the overall context around how an adversary or a bad actor might be structured. We roughly think of bad actors as being of four kinds. One, just an entirely machine powered bot. A second kind is one which is a machine powered bot, but with some human in the loop somewhere. A third one might be an entirely human manipulator, which is coordinated by a single entity. And a fourth, and not surprising one, is real accounts from people that get compromised by an adversary. Now, a typical attempt at manipulating the conversation actually uses some combination of all of these four to achieve some sort of an objective. Now, the way conversational AI ends up playing into this is think of someone trying to manipulate the conversation and what allows them to do the most harm. It's actually not an account that on its surface looks like a bot that causes harm to the conversation, right? Like we're all immune to things that look like bots. And in fact, a lot of accounts that people on Twitter look at them and they say, oh, this looks like a bot. They're often actually real people who just didn't do the work to make their account look real. But the most harmful accounts are the ones that don't look like bots on the surface. And in fact, mislead people into believing that they're real people and allow people to be influenced by them. Now, the way conversational AI advancements can play into this is it makes our world challenging in multiple dimensions. One, it makes it harder for us to detect that this is an attempt at manipulation because it's more realistic and it looks more like a human. That's the entire premise of the research area. Second, it causes more harm because people believe it's real and are more influenced by them. And third, we lose sort of a core primitive, right? Like we talk about a human label as a ground truth for a large number of machine learning techniques. If you believe humans are being prone to not being able to tell if something's generated by a machine versus from a real human, you lose that reliable ground truth to be able to build upon. That's why conversational AI poses this sort of unique challenge when in the hands of an adversary for us to navigate.
Yeah, those are big issues, Parag. I'd like to come back to that in a second. I did want to touch on this idea of bias. So there's some research that has been coming out recently, I think, including from the University of Washington, that they refer to how when processing natural language, on tweets and flagging hateful speech, that African Americans are more likely, they're 1.5 times more likely to be flagged than speech from others. There's a recognition of bias in the data from a lot of the research that companies like Twitter and others obviously have to rely on. You are relying on the research that is out there in terms of the data and the research on top of it. How do you counter that? What is Twitter doing?
It's a great question. I'm not familiar with the specific research you mentioned, but bias, fairness, transparency, these are key considerations in how we do this work. One thing to note about why we as people building Twitter and in general the community around machine learning need to think carefully about topics of bias is that if you think about biases, there are biases all around. What machine learning is unique at is encoding those biases through feedback loops, which are very, very fast. Previous feedback loops used to operate at the scale of years or decades. And with machine learning models in the loop, these feedback loops have gotten really, really compressed. Like they're of the order of like days or sometimes even minutes. And when you start with biased data and feed it into this rapid feedback loop, it can actually not just calcify the bias, but potentially make it worse. That is why we as practitioners in this field need to really be thinking about how we're dealing with bias, how we're ensuring that we're looking at the data and the models carefully, how we're not just thinking about the root cause of the bias, but also the outcomes that result from our models and these feedback loops and these products that we're building. That's why that's an area of major focus for us. And we're a part of the greater community that is focused on these issues, which is super cross-functional.
Yeah, Parag. Yeah, certainly this is a moving target. What you're articulating is that Twitter has a very dynamic environment that it's dealing with, right? Where a conversation changes depending on what happened yesterday. Today, you're going to have to then stay up with the adversaries that are changing their tactics. This idea of the feedback loop. Can you talk a little bit about, for others listening? Is this applicable in other areas outside of where Twitter is active, right? Twitter is obviously active in following speech, labeling speech. Is this a field that other practitioners are taking or should be taking a look at, that offer opportunities elsewhere?
Certainly. There's a lot of areas of research embedded. There's like a pretty healthy field around dealing with fairness and bias in models. There's also a lot of people thinking about providing more transparency in machine learning or providing more control on machine learning as well as where data resides. These are all really interesting and exciting fields for us to benefit from as we continue building our service and our product. Additionally, there's a lot of work going on in the area where people think about adversarial machine learning or machine learning in the adversarial context. Today, if you think about how typical models are built, they're trying to learn a distribution in a data set. And by definition, they're making a stationary assumption that tomorrow will look similar to today. And then trying to do some work to make sure you learn rapidly and adapt as the distribution changes. There's more work happening now where you can model things in a slightly adversarial context where you think not just about the data distribution as it exists today, but like how it might evolve. And those sort of topics sort of give us hope for advancements and be able to navigate some of these issues in more systematic ways. Other areas of advancements in machine learning that are particularly interesting to us are ones which sort of take ML techniques and make them more real-time, whether they be recommendation algorithms to promote healthier content. Because as you noted on Twitter, like things change really fast and things happen really fast. If a piece of content is going to matter in a good or a bad way, it's going to have its impact within minutes and hours and not days. So it's not okay for me to wait a day for my model to catch up and learn what to do with it. And I need to learn in real time. And the last field I'll mention is being able to compose together advancements from various fields, right? There's people working on graph deep learning. There's people working on media and vision like things. There's people working on NLP. Uh, in reality, to solve an end-to-end problem, we have to compose together data and insights from all of these fields into a product experience. Today, we end up doing them somewhat heuristically by layering one on top of the other or in some way. Being able to do that systematically, which a bunch of people are working on, would hugely benefit us in solving problems better.
Parag, this is interesting. A lot of these things, I imagine, you've been working on previous to May and June, where there's been a big conversation, an increased awareness around racial injustice with some of the events in the United States that has happened. And then you've been in the news, obviously, being forced into the news, labeling tweets from the President of the United States with additional information and perspective around so-called hateful speech, right? Can you talk a little bit about the cultural and institutional changes Twitter has made at the engineering team side, or how you're conducting AI and ML?
So it's useful to think about the last few months in context. To us as a team, it's become increasingly clear what our role is in the world. It is to serve the public conversation. And these last few months, whether they be around the implications on public health due to COVID, or to have a conversation around racial injustices in this country, has emphasized the role of public conversation as a concept. And we are one small part that serves this conversation so that we move forward together as a people. As we've sort of gone through this time, there's a bunch of things that we as an organization have learned, right? We've learned everything from the importance of our service being resilient as we've seen a surge of usage across the world and highly variable across the world, like different weeks when different countries are become interested in engaging on the platform, evolving topics and ways people engage, as well as to deal with the complexities of disrupted supply chains in a moment of increased usage on the platform. On the other side, we've had to work through an increased amount of passion on the service, on whatever the topic of conversation be, because of the heightened importance of these topics. And have had to prioritize our work to do our best to help people and improve the health of the conversation during this time, right? We relatively quickly worked on a policy around misinformation around COVID-19 as we saw that threat emerge. This was a policy which was meant specifically to mitigate harms. And our strategy in the space is not to mitigate, to tackle all misinformation in the world. There's too much of it, and we don't have scalable approaches to navigate that. And in fact, it's not our role to do so. But to focus our efforts on where it can cause most harms. We recently actually shared our principles around how we think about this space. The two I will note are, one, we're not tackling all misinformation, we're prioritizing based on harm. Two, our efforts are not focused on determining what's true or false. They're focused on providing labels and annotations so people can find easy access to reliable information as well as the greater conversation around a topic so that they can make up their mind. As we've gone about doing that, we've had to quickly adapt and build in both human as well as automated solutions to scale these policies and build these policies and improve the conversation as a result. So those are just some of the examples of the ways we've gone about doing things. In terms of how we think about bias, right? We build systems. That's why we ground solutions in policy and then build using product and technology. And our processes, are designed to avoid biases, right? By doing things through well-defined policies and processes, we're able to avoid biases. At the same time, it puts us in a situation where things move slower than we'll all like, right? It takes us a while to develop a process to scalably have automation to enforce the policy. I'm not proud that we miss a large amount of misinformation even where we have policy, because we haven't been able to build these automated systems in place. And when we have built them, we sometimes fail to label them. We've labeled many thousands of tweets on the COVID misleading information policy across the world in many languages. But I don't believe that's enough. And we have far too many false positives. So we need to work on things and make things better.
Parag, I could tell this is a very complex product that you're building. So you do have process, you have product specifically in terms of how it's implemented. You have the policy. So AI and ML is just one small component. In that sense, in your view, is it a relatively, um, I guess, a static input or a commoditized input, or do advancements on the ML and AI side really make a difference? Can you talk a little bit about advancements you'd like to see there, perhaps that may not exist yet?
Yeah, it's definitely not like a commoditized input for us, right? Like we fundamentally believe in sort of the whole being a lot larger than the sum of parts, right? And that's how we like to build things at Twitter. So you only end up building a meaningful machine learning or AI solution when there's a product designed around it. The product needs to understand and accommodate for the potential false positive. It needs to provide feedback loop when the model gets something wrong, and it needs to reinforce the model when the model gets something right, right? And if you think of using machine learning like Kaggle contests, you don't actually build meaningful solutions in doing so. That's why machine learning is a key part of product development and how we think about it. Uh, when you talk about advancements, I mentioned some of these earlier, but we're really, really excited to be a part of the greater machine learning community. We try to do our work in the open. We host competitions. We're trying to make more of our data available for academics and researchers to advance techniques, build feedback loops with academics and other practitioners in the field so that we can learn from them and we can make available some of the assets we might have to advance their work. And the advancements I'd like to see are more work on transparency, control, fairness, bias of machine learning models, improved way of thinking about real-time recommendation systems, uh, advancements in composing signals and models from various fields like vision, graph machine learning, or NLP, and to be able to compose them together into holistic models.
Great. Parag, you've been relatively humble talking about some of the challenges, the complexity, and feeling bad for not having gotten or done certain things. I just wanted to look at the bright side. Anything you've been particularly proud of, or that you felt like you've done especially well recently?
There's a lot to be proud of when you get to represent all the people who work at Twitter and the great work they do. In the last year, we made it objective to take pain away from people while we enforce our terms of service. As a result, today, if you look at all of our enforcement actions, more than half of them happen as a result of a machine learning flagged tweet that might be in violation rather than requiring a human on the service to go and report a tweet for a violation, right? So you're doing a bunch of things when you do that. You are taking pain away from people to have to report, and you're getting to action faster, even before people see things. That work and the future promise that it creates is one thing I'm proud of. Another thing is not just about, like, we've spoken a lot about like bad conversation and how machine learning mitigates or matters there. It's worth talking about how machine learning can help elevate good conversation. We do a lot of work to bring people the most relevant content, whether it be in the home timeline or in search or in your conversation page, and encourage more thoughtful, more relevant, more healthy content to get more attention rather than everything else. And lastly, I'll talk about our work on topics, where we are gradually transitioning Twitter to be not just focused on following people, but to start to follow topics so that you can see a more diverse uh, set of points of views, as well as a diverse set of people who you hear from when you spend your time on the service. That we believe will help a lot when it comes to uh, getting people to develop more empathy, see diverse viewpoints. And a lot of the underlying mechanics are about advancements in machine learning that are enabling us to solve these critical problems.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, so much.